we will do what we call the Bowlsby Pod. Big 12, the 4 schools that joined the Big 12 when obviously the Texas-Oklahoma news broke. And we will start the Bowlsby Pod. I think we ought to start with BYU.
Well, they're undefeated. They're really tough on defense. Their offense gets the job done, and they just keep making it happen. They have a tremendous amount of faith in themselves, and they don't seem to get rattled. Teams take on the personality of their coach, and this one's really adapted Kalani Sitake really well. I think Jake Retzlaff, who wasn't the quarterback until the very end of fall camp, has been good for them, and I continue to be impressed with them week in and week out about the way that they play and their style and how confident they are.
Yeah, I haven't really been super impressed with anything necessarily, just the total package, but nothing just jumps off the page. I guess if something did, it would be the defense. But offensively, they just managed to make the big plays here and there to give them enough of an ammunition box on that side of things to be able to give the defense a little bit of help, make a special teams play here and there. But yeah, Retzlaff's done a good job. He has the occasional pick that's frustrating, but they've really just won with defense and solid play in other areas. But I don't know, I don't want to sound like I'm picking on them, but I don't think they're great. You know what I mean? But they've just won games, and the schedule, the way it looks ahead, there's a lot of winnable games on there too. You could look up and BYU goes from being 14th in the preseason to winning 10 games this year. I mean, it's very much within reason. Now, they started off pretty well last year and cratered. So, we'll see.
5-0. Yeah.
We'll see, how it tracks the rest of the way. But I do think that they've got a really good thing going on. The culture's in a really good spot. They got big noon kickoff there this weekend. And I think that makes for just a more exciting atmosphere and a lot of fun there. And I expect them to win this weekend against Arizona. Arizona's kind of a crapshoot of a team, but I think BYU's got the defense to kind of contain McMillan and company, and I think they've got enough offensively to give Arizona problems as well. They got to get a run game going, though. That's the big thing that we haven't seen from BYU is a lack of run game. If they can get that going, then they'd really be in business because that's about the only thing missing at this point. But Arizona's going to test that defense with McMillan. I mean, they're going to stretch the field with him, and so I'm very curious to see how BYU defends them. And a lot of these BYU games this year, you've heard coaches after the fact talk about the ability of Kalani Sitake's staff to kind of throw some curveballs their way, and I think coaching's been a big part of BYU's success this year, looking at the defense in particular. So, yeah, they're a good team. They're in a good spot. They win this weekend, man. I mean, it's party time because they'd be sitting at 6-0 and right there on the top of the standings.
They host Arizona. Fox, again, the big noon kickoff will be there for that. Fox 3 o'clock kickoff against Arizona. We're going to pause for a second and get back to the rest of the Bowlsby Pod. Okay, 2 Bowlsby Pod teams. UCF, after, they are damaged right now. Are they going to be able to turn things around? ESPN2 Saturday, 2:30 against another team in Cincinnati. Let's start with UCF.
They've got to get better. They got to get better in a hurry because they looked pretty good, but then the last 2 weeks they lost to a Colorado team. They lost to a Florida team that's emotionally on the ropes and hasn't played well all year, but played well against UCF and kept Billy Napier in his office for at least another week. And that's not something I thought was going to happen. They've got to get more balance. They've got to play better on defense. They can't keep falling behind like they are because it's not an offense with their running game that's designed to really play all that well from behind. And I know that while Gus Malzahn is not going anywhere at UCF, I know there's a lot of fans that are a little upset that these kind of games keep happening to them.
Yeah, they have been reeling a little bit. I think the Hurricanes, the biggest thing on their minds probably right now, but Cincinnati is going to be a great test. We'll see how that all sorts itself out. There's still things to like about that offense, but it's clearly not anything that can just line up against anybody and just expect to be able to run the football at will. That's been proven against Florida and Colorado to not be the case. So they need to win in the worst way. Cincinnati's not a gimme by any means. They know that. They've seen them in the American and now in the Big 12 and are familiar with their game. I think Brendan Sorsby's a really good quarterback that should give UCF some issues. Again, you normally chalk this up as a home game, but the circumstances are all kind of strange. So they need to bounce back. I mean, that's what would cure a lot, would be getting a win and cutting off this losing streak. But there is a little bit of a sentiment of just people kind of being fed up with Gus Malzahn and kind of the style of his teams and some of the same recurring issues. So, we'll see if that continues to be a thing, if the record continues to slide. But there's a lot of frustrations right now because you expect it to be good, and there's still chances for that to happen. But these last couple of games have been pretty brutal on your confidence levels and just where this team ranks.
Where is Cincinnati? Because they're a part of the Bowlesby poll pod, 4 teams that joined after the departures, at least announced by Texas and Oklahoma. Is Cincinnati? I would think that they've been they had the one tough loss early in the year that they let a game get away against Pitt. But have they been otherwise a pretty nice, a nice surprise?
They're better. Cincinnati's certainly better. I don't know if I would call them a nice surprise just yet, but they're better. Brendan Sorsby's been pretty good. They've got some growing to do, but they're not an automatic out anymore. I mean, that's what they were. Last year was, they were pretty much like, well, that's a W for everybody. That's not the case this season, so that's growth. And I hope that we continue to see it at Cincinnati with Scott Satterfield and what they have going on there. So, yeah, they're better. I mean, I'm still not all that scared of them, but
they beat Houston 34-0.
Yeah, but so they can do those things. They're just going to ride the wave a little bit for a while.
I think they're much better. I think they're really competitive. I think Sorsby's the guy that everybody's going to point to, but they rightfully have some other weapons like in the run game, and they just didn't have guys like Corey Kiner available for the most part against Texas Tech. Otherwise, they might win that game, and then we're talking about them being 4-1, and you're looking at their only loss being a game that they absolutely choked away against Pittsburgh. So those are their 2 losses. I think they're much improved. I think that they're on the right track. I think they've got the right quarterback, and I think that it's just a matter of staying healthy because that came into play against Texas Tech, not having the ability to run the football with either of their top 2 guys for a majority of that game. If they can get those 2 healthy, Pryor and now I'm blanking, Kiner, then I really like what they can do. Xavier Henderson's a really good target, and there's a lot to like. The defense has played pretty well for the most part, and so I think that there's a lot to like. I wouldn't put them in the Big 12 contender category, but I think they can absolutely go and beat everybody, including going in and beating UCF. I think that's a real possibility considering how UCF's sort of reeling, and I think they can provide a stiff challenge to that run game and then make KJ Jefferson have to throw it, and if he gets into a duel with Brendan Sorsby, I like Brendan Sorsby in that duel. So, this is an interesting game, and Cincinnati has a case to be made where they could be 5-0. I know everybody say, you do this, you do that, you change this, you change that. Literally, they have 4 points separating them from being 5-0 at this point. So, I like them and where they're headed.
And then Houston, a part of the Bowlesby pod, they, of course, off. We had Willie Fritz on the show yesterday. The impressive win on Friday night a week ago against TCU. They get a chance to take a deep breath. They had players step up that had lost their jobs, including Donovan Smith, when Chris went out. And their defense, they're running the ball well, but their defense is among the best in the Big 12, which is really that surprises me. But they are playing fantastic on that side of the football and a huge win against TCU.
Yeah, they are a team that was kind of making their bed in the basement of the Big 12, but now with the way that they've managed to find a win before a team like Baylor's been able to find a win in the Big 12. You got to bump them up a couple notches. They're not in the basement this week, and I don't know how many more wins are out there in front of them, but I do think that they're going to be a team that gives everybody headaches, even though, you may look at the record or this or that and think that it's not much of a challenge, but I think TCU got that rude awakening last week. I think TCU's also got their own problems, but I don't think that they probably took Houston seriously enough, and so maybe that's a wake-up call for the rest of the league. And if they didn't, I don't blame them because Houston had been outscored 54-0 in their first 2 Big 12 games. So that was a big deal for them to get that win. And, they've had a couple losses. The Oklahoma game was brutal, but then they go beat Rice in a rivalry game. So that's okay, cool. Then they have the 2 brutal blowouts in the Big 12. They go beat TCU. So it's been very up and down, mostly down, but there's been a couple of ups, and I think there's a couple of ups out there. If they can, play defense the way that they've been playing it, and if they can just get some stability there on offense, whether that's Chris or Smith, but hopefully Chris is healthy to give them that newer option and maybe a little bit of a different flavor. But that's where the problems lie. If they can figure out something offensively in the passing game, then that defense is going to keep them in some ball games. But they got Utah coming up, K-State coming up. But the break this week to get ready for Kansas, that makes that game a little bit interesting to have that extra time. So, lick your wounds and reset and see what you can scrounge together in the next few weeks.
Paul, wrap it up with Houston with Willie Fritz on yesterday. We appreciated his time. You heard what Craig said, what I said about their defense.
Their defense was great. Zion Chris played great. Hopefully the injury he had isn't that bad and we can see more of him. But, yeah, their defense was fantastic against TCU. And that's not what I expected, but their defense is also pretty good against Iowa State. Their
defense is just good.
Yeah,
it's just good defense.
Yeah, it's good against Oklahoma. They've got a good defense, and again, you throw that in, and you get Zion Chris hot, and he can, be a dual threat quarterback. I mean, he was 11 for 13 passing the ball, and then he had almost 100 yards rushing when he had to go out of the game with that elbow injury. So if you can get that kind of production, they're going to be better faster than we thought. So, they're not a team. They're not a team that you should be taking lightly.
There's a handful of teams that wish they could have the problems that Houston's had and just that nice feel-good win. I said this on Saturday's pregame before the game at Iowa State, in which Baylor started well, but then again they got thumped. Why not do what Houston did against TCU? Now, I'm not comparing TCU to Iowa State because we know that Iowa State is very, very, very good.